Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas, on Thursday, December the 4th, and welcome to our commentary. Well, we're going to talk a little bit today about Henry Cuellar, but before we get there, let me just talk a little bit about a post over at the American Thinker. I wrote a post about what happened in Tennessee, the District 7 special election, which I think is, as often happens with these special elections, it's being blown out of proportion. As it turned out, just for a little perspective, District 7 is what they call a Republican plus 10 district, meaning the partisan rating, if you will, if you want to call it a rating, the partisan rating is Republicans plus 10. And it just means that if everybody voted uh, the way that they are affiliated, the Republicans should win the district by 10 points. That's roughly what it means. It's not always perfect, but that's roughly what it means. And as it turned out, the Republican candidate in this district, who is now the new congressman from Tennessee, won the election by 8.9, almost 9 points. So he came pretty close to fulfilling the partisan rating of that district. Again, plus 10, and he won by 8.9, almost 9 points. That's not a bad victory. I don't care how you split it. That's not a bad victory to win by 9 points, particularly someone like him who's not well known. He replaced a well known congressman who had resigned. And again, this was a special election on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. Normally, those are not elections where people get that turned on. But, it was what it was. He won by 9 points. Now, the argument is it's a loss for the Republicans because Trump won the district by 22 points. Well, yeah, that's true. Trump won the district by 22 points. But that was President Trump running in a presidential election year where you're going to get a much bigger turnout. And if the partisan rating is Republicans plus 10 and Trump won the election by 22, what that's telling me is that there's a lot of Democrats and independents who voted for Trump, meaning that you get from 10 to 22 by having a lot of Democrats and independents in that district who voted for President Trump. That's what that tells me. So, again, I think there's a tendency to exaggerate these off-year elections. It doesn't mean that the Republicans are off the hook, and let me explain what that means. Midterms are always difficult for the president in power. So I think the White House knows that they've got their work cut out for them. They're going to have to go out there and win the election. They cannot rely on good luck or whatever. They're going to have to get out there and work and win the election. I like the idea of a convention because that will at least create interest in a election. I like the idea of what Newt Gingrich did back in '94. Of course, at the time, Gingrich was out of power, or at least the Republicans were out of power. But I like the idea of a contract with America or some kind of a message that ties all the Republican candidates together. In this case, it would be, of course, a Trump continuation plan. So I like all of those, and I'm pretty sure the White House is aware of the fact that they have their work cut out for them in 2024, and they're going to have to work hard to keep the House. I have no doubt that they know that. They should know that, and if they don't know that, they're going to lose. So my guess is that they know it quite well, and they're going to have a full-blown effort to keep the House. Whether they do or not, well, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I think we'll have a much better sense of all of this by summer, when some of the economic numbers are more clear than they are right now. So we'll see. We'll see. But it was a good victory for the Republicans in Tennessee 7. And if you remember all the predictions that we were getting, that it was going to be 2 points and 3 points, none of that turned out to be true. Because, again, it ended up being an election decided by 9 points, which is not a bad victory. Maybe it could have been better. I don't dispute that. But 9 points is not a bad victory at all. Not a bad victory at all. Now, because this is a special election and he's fulfilling the term of the congressman who resigned, then this particular district they're gonna have to be another election in November of 2026. So roughly in a year, they're going to have another election. And we'll see who are the candidates at the time. My guess is that it could be both of them again. And if that's the case, I would predict that the Republican wins by at least 15 points, because it'll be a more traditional turnout and a more intense turnout than there was in this off-year election. So again, I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. The Republicans got to get their act together and win in 2026. And in order to do that, as I mentioned in my post, President Trump has to be up front, because he's still the only one who can get out there and get the vote. So President Trump has to look at 26 almost as a re-election year. Even though he's not on the ballot, he is kind of. And he's got to look at it as a re-election campaign, that he's going to go out there and try to keep the House. That's how he's got to look at it. And I hope he does, because if he does, I think he'll be fine. Well, let's talk about Henry Cuellar. As you probably know, Henry Cuellar, Representative Henry Cuellar from Laredo, Texas, a Democrat, centrist Democrat. He's not a Republican. He's a centrist Democrat. And he has, over the last few years, voted with Republicans. He's a realist. That's what I call him. Henry Cuellar is a realist. He understands that he's a Democrat in a Republican delegation. So he's got to work with Republicans if he wants to get things done for his district. I mean, that's just the reality of it. You got to work with a majority party if you want to get things done for your district. And Henry Cuellar has always been good at that. So he was very vocal, very strong critic of President Biden and his border policies. He was also one of the few pro-life Democrats, at least one of the few who will admit that he's a pro-life Democrat. And he was up against the Biden administration on the border, on abortion. And then all of a sudden, they indict him with these charges, whatever they were. Doesn't matter. He was indicted. And he was reelected, nevertheless, in 2024. So obviously the voters were not offended by this. But then, a lot of people, myself included, I always thought that that was a politically motivated indictment. I always felt that they were trying to get at him for the fact that he had been so critical of the administration on the border. And I think that's true. I always felt that way. So President Trump pardoned him. And what happens now, nobody really knows. He's still the Democrat running in that district for re-election. I assume he'll have to go through a primary like he did before. And we'll see what happens. But I think President Trump was correct in pardoning him, because he was the victim, Henry Cuellar, that is, was the victim of clearly a political persecution. I have no doubt whatsoever that he was. I have no doubt that he was the victim of a political persecution, and I'm glad that he was pardoned, because we don't need those kinds of political persecutions in this country. And if there is one person who knows about political persecution in the United States, that person is Donald Trump, because that's what they did to him in the last few years. So I'm glad that President Trump stepped in and pardoned Henry Cuellar. What happens now? We'll have to wait and see. It's way too early to know what's going to happen politically down in Laredo, Texas, where he's going to be running sometime later in 2026. I have a post that will be coming out tomorrow, Friday, where I talk about climate change and what appears to be, a mood change. You don't seem to have all of the doom and gloom of climate change that you had before. It seems like more and more people are stepping back a little bit and saying, yeah, there is climate change. And of course, we have to protect the environment, but we can't just throw the baby out with the water, as they say, and, become a green energy country, because that doesn't work. Just ask some of the Europeans how their green energy programs are going. So there seems to be a sense of realism coming into the movement, which is a good thing, because we can have a serious conversation about climate change. But when you're telling me that the world is going to come to an end, when you're telling me that the cities on the coast are going to be flooded in 10 years and that, entire parts of the world are going to disappear because of climate change. I think that's the kind of doom and gloom that has done the movement a tremendous harm. And I think it's important to have serious conversations about what's going on with climate change, not these lunatics blocking bridges and blocking traffic or going into museums and destroying oil-based products or paintings. That's not what the movement needs. But unfortunately, that's what became of the movement. And I think they did themselves a lot of harm. So let's bring everything down to reality so we can have a realistic conversation about the climate. I'm just as concerned as everybody is with protecting the climate. But don't give me all the doom and gloom that the world is going to disappear in 10 to 12 years. I mean, come on. That doesn't make any sense. Well, thanks for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later the next time. Bye-bye, everybody.